Hello, today we are interviewing Mrs. Teresa Tucker of the East Cleveland Community Theater. This is Wednesday, November 14th, 2012, and she is the Executive Director of the theater. Ms. Tucker, thank you very much for um, agreeing to do this interview today. And I would like for you to tell me a little bit about yourself and about your history of coming to the city of East Cleveland. But let's basically start with yourself, your husband, your children.
I'm a lifelong resident of Cleveland. I was born in Cleveland. I attended Glenville High School, and I'm a proud graduate and a tar butter. I attended Wilberforce University, and I have been married to my husband, Emil, who just happens to be the first African American firefighter in East Cleveland. He came to the city of East Cleveland in October of 1979. I have been married to him for 46 years. We have two adult children, Sean and Teresa. They are 45 and 41 years of age, and I'm the proud grandmother of 6 grandchildren.
Very good.
One of whom is a college student.
Okay. Now, Wilberforce is a historically black
Yes, it
university?
is.
Okay, now is it the oldest or?
It's one of the oldest, yes.
Okay, and how did you choose Wilberforce?
Well, we had a number of recruiters come to my high school when I was a senior at Glenville High School. And of all of the recruiters that came, his program sounded the most impressive, and plus it was close to home.
Okay, what was your field of study at the time?
Elementary education.
Okay, and were you in the elementary school system here?
No, I was not. I have participated in the elementary school system as a tutor, but I chose to do a variety of different things, all of which involved some teaching.
Okay, and what about your husband? You said he was one of the first?
He was the first African American fireman in East Cleveland.
Okay, and how did that come about?
Well, he was interested in doing that type of work, and the opportunity presented itself to actually take the test. And as a result, he was the person that was selected. And it was a very interesting experience for him because, as you know, that's a blue-collar position. And unfortunately, many Caucasians have not had the exposure to African Americans, some of whom were not in, World War II, where they had the integrated army. So it was a real learning experience for him, although he had been in the service during Vietnam and he had been exposed to all ethnicities. They had not had that experience. So it was a teaching experience to him. And you can imagine the issues that arose because they lived in close quarters. They had to get along. They were exposed to our culture, the kinds of things that we ate. And overall, it was a very rewarding experience, but it was a life-changing experience. And it was very stressful at times.
Okay, and about what year was this going on?
This was 1979.
79?
Yes.
Okay, now with him joining the East Cleveland Fire Department, did that bring your family?
I'm sorry, it was 69.
69?
Yes.
Okay, 69. Okay, how did that bring your family to the city of East Cleveland, or was something else already going on?
That was what brought us to the city of East Cleveland. We wanted to be closer to his place of employment. And of course, he knew a number of things about the city. And at that time, it was very intriguing and inviting.
Okay.
And it was just beginning the process of integrating.
Okay, well, with your husband being a fireman here, what activities did you join within the city of East Cleveland at that time?
At the time, I was a homemaker, and I was not involved in a lot of activities other than the school activities like PTA and that kind of thing.
Okay. Now, thinking back, what is your earliest and fondest memory of the city of East Cleveland?
Well, of course, the services. At that time, we had our garbage collected twice a week. The garbage personnel would come to the back of our yard, get our garbage cans, and we didn't have to drag them to the front. That was very nice. We had a city manager form of government, which I thought was very effective. There were opportunities to participate in groups, and in fact, that's how the theater got started. Because as a number of African Americans began to move into the community, there was a concern and a fear that there would be white flight, and there were those who wanted to balance the community and to stabilize the community. And someone had the wonderful idea of coming up with some type of activity that would allow peoples of all races and colors to work together and become familiar with each other, with the belief that if you know a person, if you understand that they're more like me than unlike me, they would become involved and stay in the community. And that was very successful in the early years.
Okay, so tell me more about your activities within the East Cleveland Community Theater.
Okay, there are a number of things that we do in the East Cleveland Community Theater, and I came to the theater at a time when I was thinking of retiring from my former career, which was that of a social worker counselor. And someone knew me, and by the way, I think it's very telling that this is has been a very stable organization, because there have only been two other directors, the founding director and the person previous to myself, who was Ted Carton, and then I am the third executive director. But they were looking for an executive director, and in another life, I've worn a number of hats. I was a school board member here in East Cleveland, and I came to that role in 1977, and I remained on the school board for 12 years and left the school board at the end of my term in December of '89. So this person was very familiar with the work that I had done on the school board and had heard that I might possibly leaving my job, and she encouraged me to come to the theater and to apply for the position, and the rest is history, I always like to say. So I have been at the theater since August of 2002. One of the things that I did when I came to the theater, which was really a very challenging and enjoyable experience, because I came to the theater at the time around 9/11, when, as you know, many theaters did not survive. It was very challenging, and it was just at the onset of all of the difficulties that many organizations in the arts were having. But one of the nice things about East Cleveland Theater, we still have founding members who are part of the theater. We most recently lost one of our prominent members, Miss Johnny Kawasaki, this past summer, but she had been a part of the theater for all of those years. The people that originally founded this theater, I always say the only way they leave is when they get too ill or they die. But they stick around, and that's a good thing, because that provides important stability for the theater. But I came to the theater and I looked around and I wanted to see what new things we could add to the theater, because one of the focuses of the theater is to provide opportunities for families and children. And at the time, the activities for children were not where I thought they should be. So after evaluating what we could do to bring more children in, to provide more opportunities, because in the past we had always provided drama classes, dance classes, and the sort, I thought it would be wonderful if we had a summer camp. So in 2003, we launched our summer camp, which provided young people who normally don't have an opportunity to get exposed to the arts, because in the African American inner city, we're underexposed to the arts. And as you well know, we are a very talented group of people. So this provided an opportunity for the young people to take dance classes, drama classes, arts and crafts classes, vocal music classes. And at the end of the summer camp, which originally was 8 weeks, and then we condensed it to 6 weeks, they had a wonderful production. Each year, we added more young people, because the first year we only had 13 young people. And each year, the program became more successful, and we were getting kids through word of mouth. And we put a big focus on providing young people an opportunity to use their reading skills, because after all, you have to be able to read a skit. It provided an opportunity for them to raise their self-esteem, because it takes a lot of self-esteem to step on a stage. It also provided them an opportunity to learn the importance of working together, because you can't have a successful production if you're not working together, if you're not cooperating. So there are a number of life skills that you learn just by being a part of the theater. And one of the stories that I enjoy most early on, there was a young lady who lived in Cleveland Heights, and she was very shy. And in fact, she was so shy that she was too shy to go down to the registration area for summer camp. So I decided I'd go down with her. And to see this young lady blossom was a joy to behold. And not only did she blossom, she began to participate in some of our regular shows during the season, which was an ultimate goal of mine, to expose the young people to the arts, to encourage them to participate and to develop a love of the art so that they in turn could become a part of some of our productions when there was, opportunities for as a cast member. And this I felt was important because the theater will die if we don't groom new young people to participate in the theater. So that was a successful goal. The other thing is that it's a community theater. I thought it was very important to offer this space for other groups, and we have an East Cleveland collaborative, which consists of social workers and personnel in the greater Cleveland area who service the families in East Cleveland. And they meet here monthly, which is a good way to use this facility. Aside from that, prior to my coming, there were a number of people who wanted to rent the theater or to produce a play, and they had nowhere to go. And this was a place for them to come, have their dream come true of seeing their work displayed on stage, and that has been successful. In fact, our first production of the season, which just ended Sunday, was The Dream and the Journey, a Hollywood story. There was a young lady who had appeared on our stage a number of times, and she had written a play. And after reading it, I thought it was a fantastic play with a great message for young and old alike. So that was our first production this year, and that gave her an opportunity to be exposed. And it also gave us an opportunity to say, hey, perhaps this is a place where you want to come. The other thing that's really great about East Cleveland Theater, and I say this every time I welcome you, is that anyone with a desire to perform can perform here. You don't have to have a vitae that's an arm's length. You don't have to have previous experience. All that you have to have is a willingness to learn, because we consider ourselves a teaching theater, and a willingness to be committed to your role, to be committed to doing the very best job, and we'll teach you the rest. And there are those people who enjoy theater life, but they don't feel they have the confidence to stand on stage. We have a number of opportunities behind stage. With the stage manager, I always marvel at the hard work that they do. That's the person, that's the glue that holds everything together after all of the rehearsals are done, after the director has done his or her thing. And I think that that's an important role for anybody to pursue. And then we have women or men who help with our young people. We have roles as a costumer, as a prop person, and many people might not think that a property manager is important, but yes, indeed it is, because that's the person that finds all of the things that the characters use and that need to be on the stage. And we're very fortunate to have a fantastic tech person. That's the guy who designs the stage. That's the guy who makes your dream come true physically on the stage, and he's fantastic. He also does work at other greater Cleveland theaters, such as Brecksville. So I like to think of East Cleveland Theater as a family. And we're adding a new person, a marketing person, because we understand more and more that you need to have someone that's out there selling your wares. The other nice thing about being at East Cleveland Theater is that and it kind of shocks me, people keep saying, oh, I never knew you existed. I didn't realize what that building was. But I can assure you that once they step inside our doors, there's a welcoming feeling. Once they see what we're doing on stage, there's a sense of pride. And I'm always hearing, oh, I'll be back. And many of them do come back. We've had plays where people come 2 and 3 times. For example, we did A Raisin in the Sun, and everybody thinks of Ruby Dee and Sidney Poitier. And I was so proud to hear people say, I saw the original, yours was better. Or when we did Fenced by August Wilson, wow, yours was as good as the one in New York. So I think it brings a sense of pride to everyone who comes, particularly African Americans, to see our talents displayed on stage. And that's very important. And many times people come, and because of what they see, they decide, I can do that too. And they indeed come and they actually appear on our stage. I was pleased on one occasion we're getting ready to do Steal Away, and that will be in honor of Miss Johnny Kawasaki because that was one of her last appearances. But we did it a few years ago, and one of the young ladies who was in the show had said that that was on her bucket list to appear on stage. And she provided probably the best performance in that play, even though that was her first time. And I tried to get her to do it again. She said, oh, no, this was just a bucket list thing, and I've done it. So I'm moving on to something else. So I think that it's a great place to come. It's a great place to have an opportunity to perform on stage or work behind stage. It's a great place to display your artwork, which is another thing we do. We provide an opportunity for local artists to display their work. So anyone with artistic abilities can come and find out if they're one of the people that can be displayed during our shows because it provides great exposure. You also get an opportunity to sell some of your work. One of the exciting things was 2 seasons ago, there was a retired Cleveland teacher who just happened to be taking art classes at community college. And she was taking them from Alice Seifela, who is our art director here. And she was doing such a fantastic job that Alice Seifela asked her, do you have other work? And she said, yeah, I have a couple of things here and there. So she goes to this woman's home who happens to live in East Cleveland in the Forest Hills area. And she goes into her closet, and she has all these pictures stacked inside. She has pictures underneath her bed and everywhere you could imagine. And the pictures were absolutely beautiful, but they had never been framed. They were works that she had done that she had not, even given any consideration to. And she was a person in her late 60s, early 70s. And this beautiful work was just not exposed to people. And that was one of our most beautiful shows that we had. We had another lady who was Jewish, and she did a photo show. And the way she captured the African American spirit was just amazing. The pictures were just fantastic. And you have to have a certain eye to be able to capture that spirit. And it was just absolutely beautiful. One of my favorite pictures was that of we did another photo show, was of a little boy about 5 years old, dressed in one of those like gangster outfits with the suit and the big hat. And it was just adorable. So what people have expressed to me and found is that many times the arts can release stress, just getting involved, because we had a young woman who was mentally challenged, and her work was fantastic. And this was the way she coped with her disability. So it's just a great place to provide a lot of opportunities for a lot of people. And I always say to a person, you don't know what hidden talents you have. And somebody's always calling me, asking me about, do you have any classes for 2-year-olds? Unfortunately, we don't, because as I said, we're a talented group of people, and sometimes we express those talents at a very early age. So we've had people on stage that were 3 or 4. We've had people on stage that were in their 80s. So you're never too old, and you're never too young to appear on our stage.
Okay, thank you. Now, we're going to take a shot of an artist that you have displayed some art today. Mm-hmm. What is that particular artist's name?
That's Mr. Tony Williams' work.
Okay.
And his profession is in the mental health field, which is interesting. However, he's a noticed artist. He's a designer that's worked in New York, and he has a lot of skills. And I particularly like his work because, as you can see, it's mammoth in size. And I would say that these are the largest pieces of artwork that we've ever displayed.
Okay, thank you. So we're looking forward to showing that work. Now, I'd like to ask you about the changes you've seen in the city. Earlier, you spoke about being a part of a city manager form of government as opposed to mayor and council. Would you like to talk a little bit more about that?
Well, I was not a part personally, but when I moved to the city, that was the type of government that we had. And it appeared to work very efficiently because you have to remember that a city manager is trained by profession to operate a city. So he had some very good skills that he was able to bring to the city, understanding fiscal management and those kinds of things. And there was some people who were concerned because under that system, our council would hire a person. So the public didn't have that much say in what happened. And there were many people who were concerned about that process and felt that the public should actually elect a person. And that's when we, switched over to the mayor system.
Okay. Now, can you see a great difference between the two managing styles, or is there not very much change in the way?
Well, the basic difference that I've seen, it's become more political.
Okay.
There was not as much politics when you had the city manager form of government, because once you involve the public and electing people, people tend to have more to say about it, and I've seen a little bit more dissension there.
Okay. What about other changes over the years in the city? Some fond memories. I think you touched on that. Things that have been contributed to the city moving forward. Let's just start with your fondest memory for you. What actually brought you to the city of East Cleveland? Well, you stated your husband, but once you got here, what kept you here?
Well, basically, one of the things that I had said early on, I was going to try to find a community that I could stay in for the duration of my young sons growing up, so that they could have the continuity, the consistency of being in one school system, growing up, and then going off to college. And we were able to do that. Because my husband was in the service I mentioned earlier, and we moved around a lot. So I said when we have children, we have to find a stable place to stay. And in fact, it took us 2 years to find a home that we felt comfortable living in. I really liked the school system. At the time that I moved to East Cleveland, they were renowned for their school system. And it was a well-respected school system. And I got involved in the school system, as I indicated before. I got involved. I was a homemaker at the time. I would tutor. And one of the reasons I had entered the school as a tutor is I was thinking about going back to school to finish my career in education. And a friend of mine was a teacher, and she said, I think you better check that out, because teaching has changed a lot since you were involved. And I did, and it was a very rewarding experience. It was rewarding in that I knew the kids in the community, and it was always welcoming when I was out in the community and people felt comfortable. The kids would come over and say, hi, Mrs. Tucker, and all of that. And it made me feel a part of the community, which I thought was a very good thing, because I think it's important to have as many people that work in the school system also live in the school system. That makes a big, big difference, I think, because there's a different sense of commitment when you actually live in the city. And the reason I became interested in becoming more involved in the school system as a board member was at the time I noted there were no women on the school board. And I thought, well, I think that it's important to have a different sense of commitment, because sometimes women can bring a different sense about education and about children and the kinds of things that should happen. That does not diminish what a man can bring to the table, but I think more diversity in any organization is really good. And at the time, I was very fortunate. We had Dr. Edwards was the superintendent, and he was a very open person. He was open to suggestions, and he'd always say, "Oh, here comes Mrs. Tucker on Monday morning with her list of things that she wants to do or she's learned about." And among those things was I had read about an interesting program in Philadelphia at the time. And it was a program where they went back to the basics. Because at the time, there was a lot of question of whether or not we should do some of the things the old way. And I looked into that, and Dr. Edwards traveled there, and we brought that program to East Cleveland schools, and they were located at the old St. Philomena school building. And also at that time, I looked around and I said, well, we're not doing anything for our gifted and talented. And as I understand, no matter where you go, I don't care if you go to a rural community, approximately 5% of the young people there are gifted and talented. And I did not feel that we were addressing that. So Dr. Edwards again looked into it, and we in turn developed a gifted and talented program. And that program coexisted with our Back to Basics program. And those young people wore uniforms. They were a little bit before their time, because many years later, before Shaw High School developed the uniforms, but the parents willingly did this. There were more parents involved with the school system. For example, instead of sending report cards home at that school, parents came to get the report cards. And at that time, they gave an opportunity for parents and teachers to talk about the specifics of the report card. There was a greater demand for commitment from the parent. But in order to get into those schools, that was part of the commitment, because as you all know, the more involvement from parents, the better the opportunity for young people to learn. And the home is a significant part in learning. We also, of course, as I said, my husband was the first African-American firefighter, and I was aware of the importance of CPR, cardiopulmonary resuscitation, and I thought it was important that the entire staff be trained to do that in the event of an emergency. And the teachers were willing, along with the teachers union, to come in on a Saturday, and they had a training for that. The other area that I was concerned about was that, as you know, so many times our young people in inner city communities don't have the exposure of careers. Because I know when I went to school, in high school, the only careers I was really aware of was teaching, doctors, lawyers, and of course, during the years that I was in school, they were pushing engineers. And I thought in some other communities, young people are exposed to all types of careers, because these people are their neighbors and parents, friends, and the like. So we developed a program, and it was called Career Education. And we made a concerted effort to bring in all kinds of people from all kinds of fields, such as oceanographers, which is something the average child in our community isn't going to be aware of, stockbrokers, and those kinds of things, to broaden their base, to understand that there are other positions other than teachers. So I felt that would expose them to more opportunities and encourage them to branch out, because we are underrepresented in most of those fields. So that gave them an opportunities, because they come in, they talk to them, and I thought that was a very positive thing. And in fact, they developed a whole unit for that, and Mr. Ed Quattro directed that program. And the young people say, oh, I didn't know you could do that. I never heard of that. I always say that I love cooking. Who knows? If I'd known more about cooking, I might be a famous chef. Who knows? But it's just, exposure.
Okay. Now, while living in the city of East Cleveland, what great changes have you observed over the time that you've been here?
Okay. The main change, I would say, is our services. As I mentioned before, I understand we don't have as many people that come to remove our snow. For example, there have been occasions where, living in East Cleveland, when we have real bad snowstorms, I couldn't get out because the snow wasn't removed on a couple of occasions. We don't have the commitment that we used to have from some of our street clubs. When I first moved here, there were tons of street clubs. In fact, unfortunately, my street had to form a street club because we were having some issues about straight people in the community, and we had not gotten the response from City Hall. So we thought if we collaborated, we could address that issue. And we were very successful doing that as a group. So you don't see those kinds of things like you used to. There's not as much involvement between the school and the city. When I was a school board member, at least in the past, there was more of a relationship between the schools in the city.
Okay, when you say city, you mean city
The city hall,
hall, okay.
the community, the council people, and the like.
Do you have an idea of what caused the change?
To be perfectly honest, I do not.
Okay, well, what other changes, or I should say, what do you think contributed to the change of the way the city clubs being in the community? What happened? Why did they start to diminish?
From what I can understand, part of it is East Cleveland has been a transient community. And I'm aware of that because of the school system. For example, you may have a person that graduates from Shaw High School, and he or she may have only been in the system a couple of years. It doesn't reflect that that child is a product of the East Cleveland school system who began in kindergarten and, went all the way through the 12th grade as my kids did, or it's been a significant part. And I have found that when you and this is not to castigate all people that are transient. You don't have the commitment. You have more renters than you did at the time that I moved to the community. And sometimes, not always, there isn't that sense of commitment, that sense of a need to become involved. Whereas when you had numbers of homeowners, they had an investment in the community. And I think that may be, I can't document it and prove it, but that may be, a part of some of the reason that you don't have the same cohesiveness and the same involvement.
Okay.
And the other thing is the time factor. More and more people are working now, and don't have the time to commit to those kinds of social activities.
Okay. Inequities, have you seen any type of inequity as far as being within the city, how services are picked up, how people are marketed to the city of East Cleveland, how the city is perceived through the media?
Of course I have. And one of the things that happened is, and I can tell you this from a number of vantage points, one having been a therapist social worker, upon occasions I would need to assist my clients with finding housing. And one of the questions I would ask was, well, is there any community that you don't want to move to? And invariably, and all too often, they would say, I don't want to move to East Cleveland. And then I would say, why? Well, it's dirty, or there's a lot of crime and that kind of thing. And one of the things that happened at the time that I moved to East Cleveland, it was a big deal. People boast about it. They had their chests stuck out. Hey, I live in East Cleveland. Yes. And what happened over the years as things began to change, and as the original group of homeowners moved out, many of whom left their property as a rental problem, those feelings began to dissipate. And one of the things I discussed at a forum, it's probably been 10 years ago, I was saying to bring some of that spirit back, I think that it would be helpful if you had signs, banners that said, I'm proud to live in East Cleveland, to indoctrinate people, to plant that in their brains that this is a good place, and of course live up to that, but to get it going. Because you think when you go through other communities, you have all kinds of signs, excellence in education. A prime example with the school, Shaw School Band. It's renowned. There should be, in my opinion, signs all over the community to remind you that this is the home of Shaw, the Shaw Cardinal Band. It's just little things that would make you feel better. Signs that say, we're proud of East Cleveland. But of course, you have to live up to that sign once you put it up there. But that plants the seed. That takes away some of that negativity. And it's the little things like that that would make a difference, because we're a very small community, and there's no reason that we can't be a model community. I mean, it's going to take a lot of work. I'm not naive. But little things like that could make a significant difference, in my opinion.
I agree with you. Okay, I'm thinking about some instances that you could perhaps think back where the city actually united to fight for something in the community? Let's see, I know for me, recently it would be making sure that the East Cleveland Post Office stayed open along that line. Is there anything in your memory that you can think of where the city gathered together and fought for something for the city of East Cleveland?
The post office, I remember. Well, one of the things that's happening, we have a group called the Bridges of Hope, and they're working very hard to do some positive things like providing gardens, a garden for the community in certain areas, a playground, that kind of thing, providing ways to make sure our children are feeling safer. So that's a collaboration of business people, church representatives, and just ordinary citizens to work towards improving the image. And then there's another group that's escaping me right now. I can't think of the name of it right now. But the first name of the director is Travell. But they're working very hard and doing community work to try to hold things together, to try to get people reinvested in the community and the city.
Okay, is that Noah Travell?
Yes, thank you.
You're welcome. Okay, now when there are a lot of issues about race, how has race or racism impacted you personally or the city of East Cleveland, in your opinion?
Well, personally, as a person who's not in good health, the hospital leaving, I was not very happy about that. And that was very disappointing.
Okay.
And that's all I'll say about that. I'm not very happy about it.
I understand. I understand what you're saying, but you feel, I would not say, was that economic or racial? How, just a little bit, could you elaborate on that? Or that's as far as you like to go?
That's as far as I like to go.
Okay, I understand. Okay, what about other surrounding institutions besides the hospital issue? How do you think they have affected the city of East Cleveland?
Well, I can say for sure that years ago we had a newspaper, and over the years we've been unsuccessful in bringing back a newspaper. And I do know, and I'm not going to name the name, but another newspaper that services the suburban community, they were not interested in involving information from East Cleveland. And I'd like to go back a little bit. You asked about the publicity and how we are represented in the newspaper. One of the things that disturbs me is so often it says East Cleveland, when in fact it is not East Cleveland that the newspaper is referring to. They're referring to the east side of Cleveland. So that you know that when you go different places and you give your address and you say East Cleveland, then you get the eye. Oh, you're from East Cleveland. Or I have been at meetings where people don't take you seriously because you say East Cleveland, that place. And I might add that I think that in many ways, because of the name, sometimes people expect nothing from the theater because you say East Cleveland. And that's regrettable. And the expectation level is very low. And then when what they see is much more than they expected, they're pleasantly surprised, but indeed surprised. And as far as the media, I can remember being on the school board, and one of our schools had been named one of the outstanding schools in the country. We got very, very, very little publicity. And even the Secretary of Education, who was Bennett at the time, he came here. Whereas if you had a food fight at Shaw High School, you'd be on the front page or the nightly news, and you'd be absorbed with information about what's going on. If there's bickering, we get lots of, publicity. But nobody ever writes about the organizations in the community that are trying to do positive things and have been successful in doing positive things. And I am aware of other communities and the things that happen there. And the only reason I'm aware is because I know somebody, not because it was on the front page. We don't have the clout to prevent negative news from being our calling card, so to speak.
Very good. Okay, what is your vision for the future of East Cleveland?
Well, I would like to see East Cleveland become the kind of community that it could become. I would like to see us focus on our young people because, to use the cliche, they are our future. And I know that there are a number of organizations who are trying to find activities for our young people because it's very important to stimulate them because having positive experience for them may be the deterrence that they need from getting involved in negative kinds of things. If you look at children who are successful, most often their parents have worked very hard to involve them in activities. And we have to recognize that some of the parents are not capable of doing that. But I used to teach parenting classes. And one of the first questions I would ask them when they came to my classes, where do you expect your child to be when they're 18? What do you expect them to be doing? In all the years that I taught parenting classes, no one parent ever said to me, well, I expect them to die before they're 18. I expect them to be in prison. I expect them to be a dropout. They always expected their children to be successful. And then, of course, the next question I would say, well, what are you doing to make that possible?
And what was their reply?
I never got an answer. That would stop them. That would stop them. And so, well, now we're going to learn what you need to do. And that's what we need to do. You know, as far as our young people are concerned, we have to make these activities readily available to them. We have to recognize how this city is spread out. And, the fact that the Civic Center is on the one end, you have kids on the other end. What activities do you provide to them? And I understand these are some of the things that are being addressed now, but they definitely need to be addressed. And then we need to look at the big picture. What are other young school systems providing? For example, the fact that I understand when I was on the school board, there were several teachers who didn't feel that it was appropriate to prepare young people for the SAT because that would be teaching the test. Well, if you go to any suburban school, they have prep classes or parents pay. We need to have tutorial programs. If our young people can't afford that, then the school or somebody, some group, needs to provide this opportunity for our young people to get the help that they need, because that may be the one factor that makes a difference in their ability to be successful. And, I always say that at some point in time, we're going to need to depend on these kids. So who are we going to depend on? And what are we doing to make sure they're worthy or capable of supporting us? So it catches you one way or the other. You either prepare them early on or, like I used to tell parents, I said, being a parent is a very difficult job and it takes a lot of time. I said, if you don't do the time in the beginning when they're growing up, you're going to do the time on the other end when you're running back and forth to prison to see them, if you are lucky enough that they live through whatever adversities that they have in life. So, it's choices that we make. I think that we do a pretty good job with the programs that we have for our seniors with Helen S. Brown. I think that whatever resources we have, we need to use them to our best advantage. And other than that, we need to work on our image so that people are not saying they don't want to move to East Cleveland.
Now, you spoke of inequity in education because that's very important.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, and that has a lot to do with our image, mm-hmm. especially with how the students perceive themselves. How has the inequity impacted the students, the community, and yourself?
I can't say exactly because I've not been involved with the school system that much. But I do know that many of our young people, when they leave this community, because they've not had exposures, at one point I taught sex education for an agency. And occasionally I would come into the school systems and see. And unfortunately, and I don't know if this is true today, at the time, there were some young people who didn't have a newspaper in their homes. So I don't know where that is now. But I mean, it's little things like that. It's the fact that many of our young people, I'll give you an experience. My oldest son had an opportunity to be a Truman Scholar, which meant that he went to several countries in Europe over the summer. And when he came back, he had been in Italy with the gondolas, and he had pictures. And he was sharing it with some of the kids. And it really saddened me when the kids said, "Oh, you took these at an amusement park." And in reality, he was there physically. So we need to be exposed. We need to be able to step outside of East Cleveland to see what the rest of the world is like so that you can dream big. If you're confined, then you can only dream about what you know. And we need to provide opportunities at every opportunity that we get for our young people to be exposed. Like I know the Case has had some programs where young people can spend the summer learning about medical fields and that kind of thing. They just need to be introduced to the idea. And for some children, that might make them want to pursue that kind of career. And like I said, career ed, where they bring in people to say, hey, this is what you can do. I would hope that the school system is providing every opportunity for any young person to see the world or see your community or step outside, because I'm aware that there are some young people who've never been outside of the greater Cleveland area. Never. And I understand there are some that have never been downtown. So all of that makes a difference. And then when you go away to college, you don't have culture shock. You don't know, because I remember years ago, my neighbor across the street, she was her granddaughter was in a private school, and the book that she was using in high school was the same book that was used in a community college. So you tell me, the both people have to compete in life. That's what you have to remember. Ultimately, we all end up at the same place trying to get employment. And how prepared are you? So it's not equal. And I believe that every person, every child has a lot of potential. It's whether or not you give them the tools that they need and the attitude that they need and work towards building self-confidence. Because I'm one that believes, sure, there are a lot of things that parents should teach you. But if they're not being taught the basic skills, the basic understanding, the little things that they taught you in kindergarten about being courteous, staying in line, following direction, we need to do more of that so that young people, will feel good about themselves and be able to survive.
Okay, one more thing. What would you be prepared to do to participate in making East Cleveland a better place?
Well, I'd be willing to give whatever time I have. If you're really going to be committed towards doing something, and you're not just going to meet just to meet. If there's going to be some progress, I would be happy to be a part of that, because my time is valuable, and I'm willing to commit, to young people in particular, to help them. If there's anything that I know that would motivate them, that would encourage them, because that's what I'm primarily concerned about more than anything. It's what the young people are doing, and I would hate to see them as a lost generation. And that's why I was so proud that so many of them voted. I can't tell you how pleased I was with that, for them to understand the importance. And I think the other thing is that we, as African Americans in particular, need to spend more time talking about our history.
Could you elaborate a little bit more on that?
Yes, to talk about our struggles, to talk about our successes, to talk about how we were able to accomplish those successes, to give a value to being dedicated, to give a value to what you can gain if you're committed, no matter what it is. And for them to get that understanding, to help them to build a sense of self-esteem instead of the picture that's always thrown up in front of us. I'll tell you a little interesting experience. I was in Toronto, in Canada, and they had just gotten the BET network. And evidently, the people of color, the African Americans, had wanted this for a very long time. And after receiving it, they decided that this was not a good thing. And the reason they decided it was not a good thing is there were far too many videos that demonstrated our failures. Too many videos showing the African American male in prison, too many negative images of young women, and they determined that this was not beneficial for them, and they decided they didn't want it. And there's something to be said for that, because when you project negative images all the time, that's what you expect. I can recall going to a client's house in the projects many years ago, and these two young men were talking as I was walking through their house, screaming, and the guy was saying, "Hey man, where have you been? I haven't seen you." He said, "Man, I was in prison. I just got out." And the thing that disturbed me about that was that when I grew up, you would never voluntarily shout out loud that you had been to prison. There would have been a sense of shame. These two were talking about going to prison like they went off to college. And those are the kind of things that we need to address. Expectations. There's so many young people that consider this a rite of passage. This is just something that happens, as if we have no control. And our young people need to understand that you do have control over some things. You can set goals, and you could say, I'm not going to do this, and I'm going to work very hard to do this. I'm not going to fall into the old thought of, hey, this is just part of life. But that will come from adults who indoctrinate our children, who tell you what's okay and what isn't okay, what's acceptable. And I don't know that we've done a good job about that at all.
But there is still hope.
There's always hope.
Okay. Well, I want to thank you very much, Ms. Tucker, for this interview. I really appreciate your time.
Thank you.
Wish you much success with the East Cleveland Community Theater.
Thank you so much.
Have a good day.
You as well.